around the moon and back. That's how NASA describes it. Simple, clean, predictable. But what they don't say is that once this mission begins, there is no turning back. At exactly 8:07 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, a spacecraft splashes down into the Pacific Ocean, not because the crew chose to return at that moment, but because their trajectory left them no other option. Days earlier, that outcome was already decided, locked in by physics, guided by gravity, and impossible to escape. We tend to think of space travel as controlled, pilots steering spacecraft, mission control making decisions, constant adjustments, constant corrections. That's how it works in movies. And even during the Apollo era, astronauts had flexibility. They could orbit the moon, delay their return, adjust their path. But Artemis 2 doesn't work like that. Because this mission doesn't rely on control, it relies on commitment. Instead of entering orbit around the moon, Artemis 2 follows a very different path, a free return trajectory. A path that doesn't stop, doesn't pause, doesn't wait for human decisions. It carries the spacecraft around the moon and sends it back to Earth in one continuous motion, like a loop that was already drawn, long before the crew ever left the ground. Once the spacecraft is injected onto this trajectory, something fundamental changes. The crew is no longer navigating freely. They are no longer deciding where to go next. Because from that point on, gravity takes over. The moon pulls them in, bends their path, and sends them back. Not because they commanded it, but because the trajectory demands it. There is a moment in every deep space mission that no one talks about. A threshold, a point where turning back becomes harder than continuing forward. For Artemis 2, that moment is silent. There's no alarm, no warning. But once it's crossed, the spacecraft is committed. Not by choice, by physics. As the crew approaches the far side of the moon, they enter one of the most extreme environments humans have ever experienced. Total isolation. Communication with Earth disappears. No signals, no instructions, no reassurance. For several minutes, they are completely alone. Behind the moon, on a path they cannot change. Imagine what that feels like. You look out the window, and Earth is gone, blocked by the moon, the only home humanity has ever known, suddenly invisible. And in that moment, when you realize something unsettling, even if something went wrong, there is no immediate way to fix it, no quick return, only the trajectory. But here's where everything becomes strange. This lack of control is actually what makes the mission safe. NASA designed this trajectory intentionally, as a backup system. If the engines fail, if systems stop responding, the spacecraft will still return to Earth, automatically. The path guarantees survival, but only if nothing pushes it off course. And that's where the real risk lies. This trajectory demands extreme precision, too shallow, and the spacecraft misses the moon entirely. Too steep, and it risks being pulled into a collision. Every variable must be perfect. Velocity, angle, distance, even a small deviation could change everything. Artemis 2 will travel farther than any human mission in generations, far beyond low Earth orbit, far beyond anything familiar. At its peak distance, Earth will shrink into something almost unrecognizable, a small blue sphere, suspended in darkness. And for the crew, that distance changes everything. Then comes the most critical moment, the flyby. The spacecraft swings around the moon, not using engines, but using gravity itself. A silent maneuver, no visible force, no dramatic burn, just a shift in direction. That determines whether the crew comes home. After the turn, the trajectory points back toward Earth. But returning isn't instant. The spacecraft must travel thousands of kilometers, falling back toward the planet, accelerating, gaining speed, until it reaches one of the most dangerous phases of the mission, re-entry. At nearly 40,000 kilometers per hour, the capsule slams into Earth's atmosphere. Friction builds instantly. Temperatures rise to thousands of degrees. The heat shield absorbs it all, protecting the crew inside as the spacecraft decelerates violently. This is where physics is no longer abstract. It becomes survival. And then, after everything, comes the moment NASA described so simply: splashdown. At exactly 8:07 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the capsule lands in the Pacific Ocean. Parachutes deploy. The descent slows, and the mission ends, exactly where the trajectory said it would. But here's what makes Artemis too different. The crew didn't just travel to the moon. They trusted a path they couldn't change, a trajectory that controlled their return, a journey where the most important decisions were made long before launch, around the moon and back. It sounds simple, but behind that simplicity is something far more complex. A mission defined not by control, but by trust. Because once they left Earth, their path was already decided. And in deep space, sometimes the safest way forward is to give up control completely. But what makes this mission even more unusual is not just the path the crew followed. It's what they experienced along the way that no camera on Earth could fully capture. Because beyond a certain distance, space stops feeling like a place and starts feeling like something else entirely. There are no reference points, no sense of direction, just darkness, and the awareness that you are moving through it at thousands of kilometers per hour. In low Earth orbit, there's always something familiar. The curve of Earth, city lights, the rhythm of day and night. But Artemis, too, leaves all of that behind. Out there is no up or down, no horizon, only silence. A silence so complete that even inside the spacecraft, it feels different, heavier. And then something unexpected begins to happen. Time starts to feel distorted. When minutes stretch, moments linger. Without familiar cues, the human brain struggles to process duration. What feels like hours might only be minutes. And in deep space, that disorientation can become overwhelming. At a certain point in the mission, Earth becomes too small to dominate the sky. It no longer fills your view, doesn't even feel close. Instead, it becomes just another object, one among many. And that realization hits harder than expected. Everything you've ever known is contained in something that small. From that distance, Earth doesn't look powerful. It looks fragile. Thin atmosphere, soft glow, a delicate boundary between life and everything else. And for the crew of Artemis, too, that view changes perspective forever. Then the moon begins to grow, slowly at first, then rapidly, until it fills the window, not as a distant object, but as a massive, silent world. Its surface is not smooth, it's violent, covered in craters, fractures, scars, a record of billions of years, written in impact. And then, the spacecraft moves behind it, the far side of the moon, a place no human on Earth can see directly. Sunlight fades, shadows deepen, and for a brief period, the crew enters complete darkness. This is the moment Mission Control has been preparing for. Signal loss. No communication with Earth. No updates. No instructions. Just the crew and the trajectory. Everything that happens during this phase must happen exactly as planned, because there is no way to intervene. Think about that for a moment. Every second of this mission, every angle, every speed, was calculated long before launch. The crew is not improvising. They are following a path defined by equations. And now, in the most isolated moment of the mission, they have to trust those calculations completely. As the spacecraft moves through the moon's gravity field, something subtle but powerful happens. Its path begins to curve, not sharply, not suddenly, but gradually, like a thread being pulled, redirected by an invisible force. This is the slingshot, the moment where the moon decides how the journey ends. If this maneuver is even slightly off, there is no easy correction. The spacecraft cannot simply stop and try again. There is no checkpoint, no reset, only momentum, only direction, and the reality that everything now depends on whether the trajectory was right. Then, slowly, light returns. The spacecraft emerges from behind the moon, and with it, Earth reappears, rising into view, bright, blue, familiar, but also distant. A destination, not a guarantee. From this point on, the spacecraft is no longer heading outward. It's falling back, accelerating toward Earth, pulled by gravity, guided by the same path that carried it away. And yet, this return is not gentle. It is fast, relentless. As Artemis II approaches Earth, its velocity increases dramatically. There are no engines slowing it down, no gradual descent, just acceleration. until the spacecraft reaches extreme speeds, faster than most missions humans have ever flown. Re-entry is not just a technical challenge. It is a boundary, a threshold between space and atmosphere, where everything changes instantly. The spacecraft encounters resistance, heat builds rapidly, and for a few intense minutes, conditions become almost unimaginable. The outer surface of the capsule experiences temperatures hotter than lava. Plasma forms around it. Signals can be disrupted. Visibility decreases. Inside, the crew feels the force of deceleration, pushed into their seats, aware that this is the final phase. Then, gradually, the speed drops. The heat fades. Parachutes deploy. One, then another, slowing the descent, stabilizing the capsule, guiding it toward the ocean below. And finally, after traveling hundreds of thousands of kilometers, after circling the moon, after trusting a path they could not change, the crew returns. Splashdown. Exactly where the trajectory said they would. But Artemis 2 is more than a mission. It's a reminder that in space, control is limited, choices are constrained, and sometimes the only way to move forward is to commit to a path completely, around the moon and back. It sounds simple, but now you know it was never that simple, because from the moment they left Earth, their return was already written, not by the crew, not by mission control, but by gravity itself. And once they began, there was no turning back, only a trajectory. That decided everything.